of that conversation right there.
Good afternoon. So welcome. So this is our secondary school panel, where you're all going to get to talk to some of our teachers and get your questions answered, hopefully. My name is Ann Hadwin. I'm the assistant principal here at Sanborn Regional High School. And also helping me out today is Sandy Rutherford over there, principal of Sanborn Regional Middle School. And we have our panel of...
Excuse the interruption. So our final
just like school.
Our panel of interruptions.
They are teacher panels. We'll have a secondary teacher panel
2:32.
happening in the auditorium and an elementary teacher panel happening in the library. Thank you.
As I was saying, so you heard a lot about what we've been doing with competency-based grading, and we wouldn't have been able to do what we've done over the past several years without our awesome, fantastic teachers. So if you wouldn't mind, a round of applause for them started. Because it is the summertime, and they're here helping us out, and truly they are amazing, and we're very fortunate. So we did have some questions that were on Slack. Pam is here. She's going to be helping us out utilizing those questions. So if you have a device and you prefer just to use your device and post questions to Slack, you can do that in real time. If you want to just raise your hand and ask a question, that's fine too. We also have kind of a group of questions that we've already put together. So we can kind of start there, but really this is kind of your time to get your questions answered. So we're going to start by having the teachers introduce themselves. They also have to use the mics because for recording purposes. So if you wouldn't mind, yeah?
I'm Pam Harland, and I'm the librarian here at the high school.
I'm Donna Harvey Mosley, and I teach here at the high school. I teach psychology, government, economics, and also worked at the middle school for more years than I'm going to admit on a microphone.
My name is Marsha Lucci. I teach freshman social studies. I'm also have been the leader of the Freshman Learning Community PLC for the last 4 years.
I'm Heidi Orestes. I teach 8th grade science.
I'm Lisa Colby. I teach grade 8 ELA. I'm also team leader for the ELA PLC, and I'm a reading specialist as well.
Donna Donnell, K-8 math coordinator.
Okay, so here we go. So the first question, this is addressed to everybody on the panel, so anyone who wants to jump in. First question. What advice would you give teachers as they begin their journey into a competency-based system?
Keep your eye on the prize. The idea, I'm not going to lie, this is a lot of work that you're about to embark upon. It's you're changing your mindset, you're changing the mindset of parents and students and fellow faculty members. Just keep in mind that the purpose of this is for the kids. It's not a teacher-centric model, it's a student-centric model. It does involve work. It involves changing a lot of the ways that you've done things. But you've heard us a couple of times in the past. Once you do it this way, you really can't go back and do it the old way, because this way is just better.
And I would say because of that, be patient. Be patient with yourself, be patient with your students, be patient with your administrators, your fellow teachers, your parents, because it is a big change and it's going to take some people a very long time to accept it and embrace it.
So I would add persevere onto patience. From an ELA point of view, I think it's been a very natural progression for us in the ELA department in particular. So not to get overwhelmed when you look at 9 competencies and 76 breakdown standards. It's a very natural progression in what we do and how we assess. So we've embraced it wholeheartedly.
I was just going to say a couple things about being a science teacher. It's natural to be project-based, whether you're doing a lab or whether you're doing any kind of a project. It's really what we do in science. So for us, creating projects and competencies with those projects was kind of easy. There were some small changes we had to make, but having the PLC time, or just time to work together, was essential for that.
this is a question that I know many of us heard from the teams that we were working with the last couple days. But where do you think teachers, schools should actually begin in this process? And this is from your point of view.
Where to begin? I'm not going to go first every
No, one
time.
time.
All right. I think it all started to make a lot more sense to me when I got better at making rubrics. So I think that I would really focus on creating rubrics that do exactly what you want them to do. If you can communicate to students what your expectations for them are, that does two things. One, it helps the student, and two, it helps you focus on what it is that you're trying to do. So I think that I got a lot better at this once I got a lot better at creating rubrics that made sense. And I took out all the words that we've all been through, like good or essential, or words that you can't really quantify in any particular way. When you do rubrics, it all kind of falls into place. And not only for you, but for the students also. They can just understand what's expected of them, and it just works better.
I think you also have to take a really good look at who you are as a person, who you are as a teacher. I am the type of person who, if you say, okay, this is what we're going to do now, good, bad, or otherwise, I'm going to jump in with both feet and I'm going to start doing it. So you have to know to what degree you're comfortable with and willing to really study yourself and how much you're willing to let go of and figure out where you're comfortable starting. I don't think there's a magic answer, because I think for everybody, where you're going to start and how you're going to start is going to depend on your personality, your style, your approach.
I definitely agree with Donna. You have to start where you're comfortable and stretch that comfort zone. For me, there was a slightly different entrance point personally, but I'm looking at it from a team point of view. We have two different kinds of PLCs. We have grade level PLCs, where we work with an interdisciplinary team, and then we have content PLCs. So we have an ELA team. So where we entered as an ELA team happened to be looking at the competencies, making sure everyone understood the 9 competencies that we were going to be held accountable for instructing and students learning. And then we had to really become very familiar with each of those 76 standards that fall under the umbrella of the competencies. And then really looking at our curriculum to make sure that we attend to the competencies and the standards, and then realign our curriculum to meet the competencies and the standards. And then we started to take a look at grading and assessments and rubrics. But it was really starting with the competencies and the standards for us to make sure everyone was on board.
Okay, another kind of general
Can I
question.
add one thing?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, don't be afraid to mess up. Don't be afraid to try and fail, and try again and fail again. You're learning just as much as everybody else is in this process. And I mean, I look back at the stuff I did 4 years ago and I just cringe. Oh my God, I did that. I gave kids that assessment. It's okay. It's all right to mess up, because you're not going to get better if you do the same thing over and over again. You had a question.
The question.
Yeah, it's just that if you have your PLCs and you're organizing them by content, is the goal to try and have them be K through 12, or is there an elementary, middle, and a high school, and they're not one thing? And if you do a K through 12, how do you give the core elementary teachers a break so they all teach everything?
At the middle school, we have content teams that are 6 through 8. So we look at curriculum and student work horizontally, 6 through 8. And then our grade level teams take a look at interdisciplinary units and assessments and student work that we share, students that we share. So that's kind of how we handle PLCs at the middle school level. Did that answer your question? We've had some district-wide committees. I know that I served on a reading specialist committee that really looks at literacy K through 12. It was all the building reading specialists that looked at literacy curriculum to look at that continuum, consistencies, the inconsistencies, the competencies, the standards, instruction, assessment, and I believe we worked on that committee for about 5 years to make sure that we were coordinating K through 12.
So we, at the high school, we primarily meet with our grade level PLCs, and then periodically we meet with our content area. It's usually once every couple months or so, depending on the time of year, and if the need arises, we'll do it more often. And when it comes to district-wide, any committee that I've been on, it generally is 1 or 2 teachers from the elementary school will sit on the social studies committee, whereas another 2 teachers might sit on the math committee, because it would be impossible and chaotic and crazy for them all to sit on all of them. So generally it's a K2 representative, and then 3, 4, 5, and my brain just shut off on numbers. I don't know if that helps.
Are committees and PLCs sort of just interchangeable names for the same thing, or is that
All
No,
separate. All separate.
All separate.
I just want to mention about with science, our 6th grade teachers meet with the elementary teachers to talk about what they've been doing in science, and then the 8th grade teachers meet with the high school teachers. We don't do it nearly as often as we do with our 6 through 8 groups, but we do meet with them to keep things in alignment.
Okay, since we're kind of on the topic of PLCs, in our district, PLCs have played a huge role in this move to competency-based grading and assessment. So could each of you maybe talk a little bit about the role that PLCs have played in the process for you, how they continue to play a role in the process?
I'll start. I'll kind of focus on the content PLCs. One of the things that our ELA team has found extremely useful are the data walks. We have certain strands that we share in common, such as research. So we'll take a data walk with the research assignment and assessment that we'll give in 6th, 7th, and 8th, and we'll do a dipstick to see where our 6th graders scoring or assessing on the competencies and the standards for research and technology use, and then for 7th grade and 8th grade. And then we'll address common strands that we see that are issues, and then we'll look at common strands where we're having lots of successes and make adjustments as necessary. So it's been really useful to look at not shared students necessarily, but certainly a horizontal snapshot of how students are achieving or not on a certain competency 6 through 8.
Okay.
You mean to be grabbed?
For science PLC, we, I think, have struggled a lot in the beginning, because at first we realized that everybody was on a different chapter in a different book, and nobody was really on the same page at all. And so we started out with developing our norms for our group, so it didn't turn into an hour of complaining about whatever that happens to be, happening at the time, which can commonly happen in meetings. And so once we developed our norms and everybody was in agreement with everything, one of the biggest things now is that we don't make any decisions until we have consensus. So we don't have people that sit through the meeting and then go back and do whatever they felt like doing before that meeting. And so that's where we've been able to have most growth and much better communication in the group. And when we studied what everybody was doing and we became aware of what everyone was doing in science, we realized that a lot of people were doing the same thing with 6th and 7th grade, or there was big gaps. So those were the things that we looked at first and got so that we all knew what everybody else was doing. And then we started studying the student work, and were able to bring in student work and compare. We would just pass things around with sticky notes, and everyone would grade it, and we'd talk about why someone gave it a 3 versus a 2. So now we've been able to, once we ironed out all that stuff in the beginning, we've been able to really move forward.
At the high school level, I honestly, I honestly don't know how we could have done the work we've done without the PLC structure. It's a great sounding board, it's a great resource. Everybody in the room is an expert. We're horizontal, so in the high school, my PLC is freshman teachers, so I have science teachers and math teachers, not math teachers, science teachers and social studies and English and wellness. Everybody brings their bit to the table. Everybody, and this was kind of a tipping point for us when we started sharing our work and our student work. We realized that we all are facing common issues and common problems, and we discussed all the ways that we've tried individually to solve them. We found out that working together is just smarter because everybody's head together is better than one person's. And I think that once we started sharing this stuff, we kind of broke down the isolation that's kind of inherent in teaching. You close your door and you're by yourself. Once you broke that down, it just became fun. You kind of look forward to these meetings, especially not the nuts and bolts meetings, but the meetings where you're sharing work and you're kicking around ideas. You just like it, and the hour goes by very quickly. You learn a lot. The structure is wonderful if you can build up a sense of sort of community purpose. So when you're in a PLC, please understand that everybody, you're going to be hesitant at first, but once you start and you understand that it's in the common good, it becomes a great resource, great tool.
And one of the things that we do as a sophomore group that might be a little different, because we do all of the things that have already been mentioned, is that we also do, part of our focus, our vision from the beginning was interdisciplinary work. So we have 3 interdisciplinary projects that we work on together over the course of the school year. So we revise, we edit, we recommend. I don't think we've done any of them the exact same way in the 3 years that we've done them. We've revised each rubric 3 times, which is impressive since it's only been 3 years. And we use our time for that. We also have flexibility in our PLCs so that if the 9 of us on the team need time to meet with our pods, which are the 3 teachers, English, science, and social studies, we can use time for that. So we have 1 meeting, which is the 9 of us plus guidance and special ed and administration and assorted other people who sometimes visit us. And then our second meeting during the week is our pod, which is just the 3 of us and whoever else we need to pull in. But we also have the flexibility to meet as a content area in that time. So I can meet with the other social studies teachers and we can talk about resources. We can talk about rubrics and we can talk about student challenges that we're facing or opportunities that we want to offer in enrichment or honors or intervention.
Yes, question.
At the high school level, do you think PLCs are your collaboration work at all in your So where do we start? I don't know. I love this model, but that's not our model.
Okay. It wasn't ours, and it isn't entirely ours, really either. The freshmen function as a team, the sophomores function as a team where we share students, but that's not true of the junior, senior PLC. It's also not true of the art, world language, or technology. Did I miss anyone? Okay. Or math. Thank you. Well, some of them do. Yeah. So the math is their own PLC. They share their students year to year, whereas we share them at the same time. The other PLCs don't, and they still meet and work together. And Pam was a member of the senior PLC, so she might be able to tell you some of the things that they worked on this year.
Did you start teaming first?
The freshmen
Yeah.
did. The freshman team has kind of been the catalyst for all this. All this stuff is kind of piloted with us. So we were a team first, but I don't think that was necessarily the case with everyone.
No, actually it started way back when I was a teacher here in the building. We called it an interdisciplinary model. It was really more like parallel teaching, but we had what's called a global studies team. So it was English and social studies working together. And then we also had a freshman English teacher that worked with us, and so that was kind of the core of what became the freshman team. And it was really, we developed a freshman team because of the needs that we saw our freshmen really had, high failure rate, just difficulty with transition, and we had a mission with them that we wanted to reduce failure rate, we wanted to ease that transition to high school, so that was kind of the motivating factor, and it was so successful that it made sense we would do something similar but very different for the sophomores, and so theirs was more a project-based learning studios model, and they focused really on leadership activities. The juniors and seniors, although they don't necessarily share students, they also have a career pathway type of model. So just something different based on what the kids need at each grade level. And something also kind of unique about the PLCs that we have here at the high schools, all the administrators all sit on a grade level team. So I'm on the PLC for the freshmen. I'm there at most of their meetings. I participate as an actual member though. I'm not there necessarily as an administrator except to provide support. But I don't run the meetings. Mark runs the meetings, and Michael sits on the sophomore team, and again, he's just there to support. He doesn't run the meetings. And Brian Stack, who's way up there in the cheap seats, sits with the juniors and seniors. So it really is like a full-on team model, top down. Is that it? We good? Okay, we're going to go to Slack.
There's a question.
Oh, is there a question? Yes.
I want to ask the middle school, what structures changed for you to do this? I want to ask the middle school, what structures changed for you to do this? Do you still have 4-person teams? Is there any like multi-age type classrooms going on? Did any structure change from middle school to allow these kinds of things to happen?
Yep. There weren't any structural changes that dictated or helped us to do this. We've gone through structural changes in the last 4 years due to cutting staff members. So we went from 2 teams in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade to 4 teams overall with a 6th grade, a 6th, 7th grade team, which is not, the teachers teach 6th grade students and 7th grade students. It's not a blended 6th, 7th, and a 7th grade, and then the 8th grade. But what really allowed us, I think, to be more successful was the introduction of PLC leaders and stipends to pay them. I think that was a big help for us. We don't, at the middle school level, sit in on team meetings unless we're asked to sit in on them, or unless we feel it's necessary to sit in on them because there's some hot stuff going on that we want to be part of. But really, I think and we were behind the elementary schools in terms of our effectiveness, in terms of our PLCs, and we probably still are behind some of the PLC groups that are within our district. But I think that's an important thing too, and I think the woman who spoke to, team versus, horizontal versus vertical teams, every school is going to be different. Every district is going to be different. And I think the things that really helped us be more successful was that we had successful PLCs around us. And one thing that has not gotten mentioned in the couple of days was someone asked a question about evaluation and how do you evaluate what's effective and what's not. We had UNH come in, their graduate education program, and they evaluated our PLCs at the elementary, middle, and high school level by sitting in on them and then reporting out to us at the end of the year. Some of it wasn't stuff you'd want to hear, in terms of effectiveness, but that sort of stuff really kind of helped us get more effective and become more effective. But the real driving force behind it was that we had teachers who wanted to do it and participated in it, and they're exceptional.
So we're going to talk about evaluation and supervision tomorrow in the session around structures that you need to have in place to sustain the model. So we're going to talk about what Sandy's mentioned.
And the only thing that I would add to that, in middle school, it's the nature of the beast for schedules to change and structures to change. So it really is staying the course of the vision, and people really being committed to the work, regardless of, minutes and hours and time allotted. So it's a commitment. And, the more people you have committed to the work, they're going to find the time. But certainly having the support and the time built in is huge. It's huge.
Okay, now we'll go to Slack. Okay, so we had a question, this was from yesterday. Peer pressure was referenced yesterday as a tool for bringing along the HAWS. What does this look like practically?
The answer is, it depends on the HAW. Because different people are going to be resistant for different reasons. Therefore, the approach needs to be different. I'm sure we all have experience with HAWS. Mark and I have experience with some of the same ones because we teach the same things. And sometimes it's because the HAW is not confident enough. So you need to sort of help build that capacity in them, help them see a practical application. So you might sit down with them and say, okay, bring me one of your assessments. Let's turn this into a performance assessment. So it's, you walk them through just like you would a student. Sometimes they're resistant just because they are resistant, which can be more complicated and generally requires multiple people persuading them in as many gentle ways as possible.
I think it goes to what Heidi said too about norms and collaboration, that there's not just one person at a table kind of sitting back and closing their eyes, but the importance of everyone contributing. There's definitely resistant people on probably every team throughout the district, but collaboration is really key. Those PLCs are really key. And if everyone's expected to contribute, then everyone will contribute. I remember my first graduate class in a reading course, and the professor, who happened to be the dean of the program, saying, listen, ladies, because it wasn't full of ladies, listen, ladies, the key thing here about becoming a consultant teacher in reading is to make sure you're a consultant and not an insultant. So, it can be very condescending to say, let's focus on one piece and we're going to fix you. It's another thing when you say, everybody bring something, we're going to kind of evaluate what we're doing, how we're viewing things, how it's working. And that's why I do love the horizontal content PLCs. Nobody feels kind of under a microscope. We're all looking at a specific assessment, that rubric, what's working, what's not working. Does it really address what we're trying to assess? Does it not? How's it worded? Do kids understand the wording? Is it user-friendly? Is it chock full of, teacher jargon? So it just, when we're all collaborating like that, it brings the HAWS into the conversation at some point in time.
There have been converts. There are people who slowly over the course of time begin to see the value of what's going on, and they'll work hard to sort of join. And quite honestly, there have been people who have left because just it's not their cup of tea, or they're not willing to make the changes. They've taught this way for 10,000 years, and they're just not going to change. And you have to respect that and help them find another school district, I guess, because I think everybody at this point is pretty much understands the direction that we're rowing in.
The other piece, and we caused this problem ourselves as school leaders, right? And we did that because of what I mentioned yesterday, administrative attention deficit disorder. So teachers have learned that if they just wait long enough, we will stop asking them to do this thing and we'll begin to ask them to do something different. So they've come to this in some cases, honestly, they've come to this because they realize that they don't really have to do it. So I think the term resolute leadership, whether that leadership's coming from the PLC or from administrators or groups of teachers, that if you're going to change the way that you do school, that we're not going back. So you can try to outweight us, but you're going to wait a very long time. And we're going to continue to coach you. We're going to continue to try to nudge you
because we're not going away. This is the way that we do school now, right? So in some cases, don't paint those resistors, those haws, all with the same brush. Some of them are just, they've lived through change and they see it not working, and we always go back to what we were doing before. So why really get on board?
One of the most important forms of peer pressure that we don't think of very often. One of the most important forms we don't think of very often is just sheer numbers. If you have 5 people in a group and 4 of them are agreeing to a direction we should go, most often people get on board. And that is one form of peer pressure that we saw work in a number of initiatives that we had, was that people just got on board, and there were reluctant people, but they got on board eventually, and not because we changed their mind necessarily, it's because their peers did. And oftentimes that the peer, just having peers be responsible and helpful is the most effective way to make a change.
One of the things that Lisa alluded to a little bit that it's very important is that we want this peer pressure to have a positive effect and outcome, because it's what's best for kids. If there's one teacher that's kind of either not pulling their weight or not moving in the right direction, it's ultimately not good for our kids. And one of the things that I've observed the freshman team do is they just make sure that they include everybody. So for example, they at one point, this was last year maybe, did book talks around behavior. We had a group of freshman students that we're just having a really hard time with, and they said, well, let's all just read a different book on classroom management and let's share out. And every single member of the team read a book and then had to report out. So the peer pressure was there. You kind of had to do it. You'd look kind of silly if you showed up on your day and was like, oh, I didn't do my homework. They also do a lot of work around looking at their performance assessments, looking at rubrics, and they will create schedules where when it's your turn to go, you bring your performance assessment and the group uses a protocol and they look at it. You bring your rubric, the group looks at it, there's a protocol, you get really good feedback. And so that's just kind of part of their practice. So it's really hard to kind of not move along with the group. And again, the way that it's done with your colleagues, and it's a safe environment, it's a trusting environment, because that's kind of the way we work and the way we built it, and years of working together, that's kind of the environment that it is. So the peer pressure kind of works that way in many of our PLCs.
I think it's maybe not just so much the peer pressure. I think in every school where I've worked, one of the things that teachers always ask for is more time to work together. And when teachers have to work in isolation all the time, they're usually really unhappy, especially if you're working with teenagers all the time. You can really get beat down and kind of lose your confidence about, am I actually doing a good job here, And working together with other teachers, you can share information. You find out, oh, Joe's doing the same thing in your class as my class. He has the same behavior. He just doesn't it's not just me. A lot of things like that you find out, and it's not so much peer pressure, but just support. You feel like you have a support system.
And I think alluding to something Michael mentioned about, we always end up going back to the way things used to be. It's sometimes you kind of have to prove that this new way works, right? You have to do some of the work and put out some of the effort and show people, look, this is what we're getting in response. This is how things are going now. And most people are well-intentioned and will say, okay, wait, I get it, this is how it works, it's good for kids, and they'll get on board for that.
That's why those data walks are kind of amazing, because there's no refuting the data. So we use that data to drive our instruction, our interventions, relearning, enrichment, and future assessments. So people have to kind of get on board when the data's in front of them. There's no refuting it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
There's a question.
Yes.
That might be a perfect segue. What does time as a special education question? I haven't heard anything about this. Of course, that's one reason I came, because I know we're going to be reteaching, reassessing, and all that, but kids on IEPs and Iowa 4, they're all on that for the reason of they never. I also understand that competency-based programs. So I guess I was wondering, what's the data showing in kids, the students on
The formatives are everything, and I think multiple people have addressed that over the week. Formatives are those little milestones that that you put in place until you get to the big event, until you get to the summative. So looking at that data that you're constantly collecting in formatives is helping you adjust the instruction along the way, and that's for regular ed, special ed. It helps you to put in the scaffolding necessary to help students, attend to the skills, the standards, and to reach the competencies. And so sometimes that, means more time. Sometimes it's just a processing speed kind of thing. Sometimes it means modifying and accommodating. So it really, that's such a unique, individual, kind of thing. It really is personalizing, education. But those formatives are all important.
The other structure we put in place that's been extremely helpful towards this is our focused learning time, where we can move kids 40 minutes a day at the high school level to places where they need intervention and reteaching. Brian Gray over there, the other freshman social studies teacher, we'll coordinate our schedules so that in any given day, he might be doing an enrichment for students who already get it, and I might be doing a reteach or vice versa, so we can catch these kids. The formative assessments, like you were saying, is a great way to identify the kids who are at a critical point, and then we can catch them during the focused learning time and make sure that they're getting the attention that they need. And we're on a 6-day schedule, so 4 out of every 6 days we can see those kids if we need to.
One of the things that Rose said yesterday that comes across in some ways as an anathema to middle school folks who believe in heterogeneity no matter what happens, is that really when you take a look at differentiation and where we are and the class sizes we have and the varying levels of students we have in a class, we've gone to a model that in some ways is a struggle for some middle school teachers, where we do have to pull out classes both in math and in reading to address some of the issues that you spoke to. You just cannot get through a short period of enrichment and reteach. You really do need, I think, to take a look at how we handle kids who are 2 and 3 years behind in reading or a year or 2 behind in math. And having targeted math, which we have, but we've eliminated some years when our kids have been doing well. And then we have an ARC and an AIM class that Lisa set up for kids who are either a year behind or more than a year behind. Those are things to take a look at even at the middle school level, even though heterogeneity is something that we as middle school people truly believe in.
I think another thing that's really important is that all of our PLCs have at least one special educator who works with our students with us on it, and then we have consulting special educators who may have students in multiple grades. So our special educator sits in the room with us as a PLC, and we talk and we plan and we adjust accordingly. I mean, we still make modifications. And in some cases, depending on the students, we're prepared to modify competencies to meet them where they are. So we had some students who had that in biology last year. And I think we have some this year that are going to have them as well. So there's an increased degree of flexibility and collaboration as it comes to that.
I'd just like to add one more thing to that. Some of the special ed students, when we grade or assess with the competencies, are really understanding that they might own some and are really good at it, and others they're not. So they're okay with the fact that I didn't do well with this competency on this assessment, but this assessment covered multiple competencies, and I get this, and I get this piece, so I just have this one piece to work on during my targeted block. So that's been a positive.
Hi, I teach high school math, and I'm hoping that I can see some sample assessments of object-based math.
Yeah, why don't you put it on Slack? Yep. Make a request. I'm sure we can find something to send you.
We can direct you to a task bank that has
Yep.
examples.
Yeah, go to
Yep.
pace.
For sure, there's some fun stuff on there. Okay, since we've been talking about competencies, here's a Slack question. Can you all share your story of actually writing your competencies and that process that you went through? It's fun.
Okay, yeah.
Which time?
So, and who's a social studies teacher in New Hampshire? Okay, so you're familiar with the frameworks, the 108-page bomb that the state of New Hampshire has for us. So we went through those and we tried to identify key concepts and stay true to those as a social studies department. We spent a couple of years honing those down, and we now have 5 competencies, 5 that we work off of, yes. Civics and government, civic engagement, history, geography, and economics, in addition to common core standards that we do. And when we look back at our first attempts at competencies, they were horrible, I'm not gonna lie. It said geography, but the things that we attributed to geography just weren't really what we were going for. So I guess it's, you take your best stab at it, you see what happens, and you make adjustments on the fly. We've never changed a competency in the middle of the year, but as soon as the year's ended, we've wadded it up like a paper ball in front of across the room and said, we're never using that competency again. In social studies, we met K to 12, and we now have standards, same standards, K to 12, with an eye towards what kind of student we want to produce at the end of the 12 years. We want them to be able to do those things. And then each teacher along the progression from K to 12 is kind of, we tweak them to make sure that they're appropriate. But the competency thing is a long, twisty road. It just starts with, what do you really want, or what does the state say that you really want your kids to know by the end of the class? And then you just take it from there with the understanding that your first attempts are just going to stink. Borrow them. Take them from someone else. Take them from us.
Yeah, I would say that that's what we did to start, too, is we looked at the state frameworks, but we also looked online and we borrowed, well, technically we didn't borrow them because we didn't ask permission, but you get the idea. And I think that the story really is one of reflection and revision, because it's never really finished.
In science, any science teachers in here? So we had the New Hampshire frameworks with 100 zillion standards that you couldn't possibly do in a year. And so we used to literally cut them up and put them on a big poster board and figure out what made most sense with, who did it in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And nobody really was happy about it. We kept trying to pare them down to a manageable, realistic size. And then NGSS came out, and we started looking at that, and we really liked the way that it was written. It was a lot easier to understand, and to see the way it was written. It just made a lot more sense for kids to read and for teachers to understand. So we took the Common Core strands and we used those as our competencies, and we also have the nature of science. So we have 7 that are the content, and then 1 with the process, the practices, and we use those. So if I have a project, I might hit on patterns and cause and effect, but then I'm probably going to hit those and some other times during the year. So they get probably connected to a project 2 or 3 times during the year, and the nature of science probably every time.
Yep. Does she have a science question?
Specific question to that. So let's say a science, right, if there's a project and it touches on probably 2 or 3 of the competencies, do you look at that project and the assessment is broken up and you report out that way, or is there 1 grade and it gets distributed to the 3 competencies?
Well, in our grading system, we have a couple of options. You can weight it 3 times and have each weight, each thing go to that separate competency, so basically 3 separate grades. Or another way is to give 1 grade and then it averages out and just puts about 33% into each one. So those are the different options that we have now.
In ELA, we definitely put in a grade for each competency. So if we've got 3 or 4 competencies under one performance-based assessment, it will report out the separate grade, for each competency. So I'm just going to kind of finish the
We also have,
competency thing. For ELA, it's got a history to it with the frameworks and the GLEs, but ultimately, go on the DOE. They're established and there they are for you. You don't have to create anything. I think it's similar for math. So, yeah, math they're on there as well, so there's no recreating any wheel.
okay.
So are your courses, do they cover all of those subjects, or is it a two-course?
It's a good question.
We've been working on that conversation ourselves actually this year, and it depends on the course. Some courses cover all of them. Some courses cover one, like we have a geography class. It covers geography. I teach government and economics, so we do that, and we do the Common Core. Mark teaches a different class, so he has more, so it depends on the course.
Try to take it from a macro point of view that by the time they get out of high school, they will have proven competency in each one of these. Freshmen teach, we basically have what's a Western Civ course, what it amounts to 1,300 to the present. We probably don't touch economics as much. We can, but we don't feel like it's necessary. We don't have to force it because there's a whole economics course coming next year.
I just wanted to add one more thing for that question about how we break them down. The nature of science, if you've seen it, it's a huge, paragraph. It's got a lot. It even has both a scientific lab and an engineering project. So we use all of those Common Core strands to create our rubrics. And we did break that down into lots of pieces. And then we took an average just for that one, for nature of science.
Okay, how about weighting assignments? Can you speak to how assignments are weighted in this model? Formative, summative.
Formatives are 10%, summatives are 90%.
Right, but each summative is equal to the other summatives, and each formative is equal to the other formative. If that makes sense.
So there's no end of the year test that's worth 10 times?
No. We also don't attach competencies to formative assessments. Therefore informing us and for informing the students about their progress. Part of that is logistical. Our grade book doesn't handle it very well if we attach competencies to formatives, but part of it is just philosophical also, that we're trying to build a background of knowledge before we assess the actual competencies.
Question in the back?
We mentioned the difficulty you had and Bill pedagogy. I'm worried about any other issues around pedagogy that you run into. First of the hurdle, particularly the high stakes subject evaluation versus balance all that.
The challenge that we're facing right now and trying to figure out the best solution is kids always learn how to work the system, and they learn the rules and they learn the consequences. And when they started to realize that they wouldn't lose points for passing something in late, they started to pass things in late and know that they weren't going to lose points for it. So that's one of the challenges that we face right now, is keeping kids to deadlines and working with them and trying to make them understand that this is an important assessment. One way that I've worked on that with kids is on the end of a project. Most of my projects are about a month to 2 months long. So at the end, they have to present in front of the class. I invite other people to come in as well, sometimes other classes. We join classes. So it's a big deal. It's a big day. I rearrange the room differently. A lot of times will be videotaping. So they understand that they're going to have to perform on that particular day. So ready or not, they're going to stand up and give their, presentation. And I have kids that try to get out of it by saying, well, it's not finished. I don't have anything. And I say to them, well, you've been working on this for 2 months. You must have something to say that you can get up there and present something. So they get that pressure. And also when they're working in a group, they get the peer pressure because they're going to have to contribute to this group and be part of that presentation. So that's one way. I've also started to give after-school invitations that to come and then, you know, if that doesn't happen, if I don't get them, you know, coming in to get the help to retake something or redo something, I insist that they come after school. So that's been pretty effective too, because they get an email home. But basically, communication with parents when things aren't happening, you know, in a timely manner, that's been the most effective.
I think it's also about changing the mindset of students. That's not just for administrators and teachers. There's a learning curve for kids, and we definitely have students who are in the transition of the old way and the new way. So middle schoolers, because of the nature of a middle schooler, will definitely try to push the parameters and not just try to slip between the cracks. Some of them will try to surf those cracks and completely, you know, make themselves as invisible as possible.
Even when kids are working in groups, they're all being graded individually. So I have a presentation grade that I give them separately. So I grade them on their presentation, and that's part of the Common Core Science that they can speak at an 8th grade level, communicate at an 8th grade level. So I use the Common Core for Science for grade for that. And so I have a rubric, and so they know that they're supposed to look up occasionally. You know, there's a whole list of things in that rubric that show them, you know, what they're going to be graded on. And then they have a separate grade for what they give me. Either it's a paper or usually it's a project that they've made, something they've built.
So group work is never a summative assessment, because you don't want to tie what other students do to a particular student's grade. So there's always a piece that comes after the group work